Welcome everybody. My name is Laura Jane Rawlings. I'm the Chief Exec of Youth Employment UK. And as you'll see, today I'm joined by a number of young people as we explore a conversation around the quality of work. The young people that are here today are all representatives of Youth Employment UK, from volunteers to some of our own apprentices who work here in the organisation. And we're just going to start a conversation really about the expectations and the needs of employers when hiring young people, and really get into what we mean when we talk about quality of work. So what we're going to cover is what the young people in today's session think quality of work is. We're going to just touch upon the work that Youth Employment UK has done around the Good Youth Employment Charter, and then we're going to see what more young people want to see from the organisations that support them, from employers to providers to youth organisations, and in fact even to the government. So guys, without further ado, I want to get into kind of hearing your views on a range of subjects that we're going to talk about today, and really just to understand from the top what you think quality of work is. I'm interested to know how many of you have really understood your employment contracts that you've had, how much training or support you've had to know whether or not you've got a good employment contract, whether you think full-time work is the most important for young people right now, part-time, what you think about 0 hours and freelancing. There's a lot of different types of contracts. So can anyone kick me off? Who's had a various range of part-time, full-time contracts? Jack, is that something that you've experienced before?
Yeah.
And have you,
big time. I've had so many different contracts.
And have you been comfortable and aware of the different types of contracts? Sorry, Jack, I think we might have a little delay.
I've had 0 hour contracts, I've had the part-time. Yeah, I've had 0 hour contracts, full-time contracts, normal contracts. So I know all about them and how hard it can be depending on which contract you're on. So I would recommend, if you can, avoid doing 0 hour contracts. You should do that, but it depends on your age, depends on what you want to do, and it depends what employer you work for. Because a lot of the main employers won't employ young people unless hours or part-time, because they don't trust you, they don't think you're experienced enough, they don't want to give you that opportunity, because they know there'll be someone applying who's 30, 40, 50, who's had that experience and can get the job and do just as well as you can. That's what they think.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jack. And anybody else had experience of 0 hours or part-time work and it's not sort of met their needs? Is that something you have experienced, Lawrence?
Yeah, so I used to work with numerous recruitment agencies, but unfortunately they would only give me very spontaneous, temporary, quite often poor quality work. Yeah, so it kind of meant that it was very hard for me to sort of plan my day, plan my week, and the work itself just wasn't really inapt with what I said to them my experiences were or my qualifications. So I kind of, at that time I did sort of, feel quite let down by them, really.
And you're now on a permanent full-time contract, right? You're now working. And
that's right, yeah.
As you moved into that full-time work, were you able to understand your employment contract and your rights and responsibilities in there? Do you think that's something that young people are able to understand and have a good understanding of what good contracts of employment look like?
I think there's still work to do, particularly where if it's a young person that's entering a permanent contract for the first time, and it may have been the case where, very much like me, they were, before that on, sort of temporary contracts or, contracting. I think sometimes it can be very hard to, sometimes be able to know the difference if you've not had that experience already, if it's your first time entering it, and what, things like probation means, things like that as well, what that looks like for a young person. So yeah, I think there could be some work done around sort of informing people better of what the difference is between, say, contracting in a recruitment agency and actually having a permanent role with an employer.
Yeah.
I still feel the three are a bit blurred still in terms of, you know, where the young person actually sits and, you know, fits in with that, particularly if it's their first job coming out of education.
Yeah, okay, good points. And particularly on the probation periods, that's language very much that is probably new to quite a lot of people entering work for the first time, isn't it? Aaron, you've done some supported internships. Did you have contracts when you were in those roles?
I didn't have contracts, no, LJ, because it was unpaid. I'm always really confused by the 0 hours contracts because I know people who've had them, and I don't think they are very clear to a lot of people because they say they're 0 hours, and people may want to work 0 hours, but choose when they want to work and not be given times in by the employer because they might not want to work at those times because they've got a 0 hour contract. And I think some.
Oh, Aaron, you hit mute. Aaron? Sorry, that was
somebody who just tried to ring me, did it just come through on the speaker?
That is fine, but that was a really good point that you're making. It's very confusing, the 0 hours. What is your entitlement? What can you say yes to? What can you say no to? Amelia, what about you? You're in a permanent contract now through an apprenticeship. Was this your first job, or have you had different experiences of different contracts in the past?
So prior to my apprenticeship, I was actually on a part-time contract working in retail alongside my sixth form education. And that was my first ever job and ever contract that I signed. And I'd only just turned 16 at the time. And it was we had to sign the contract almost there and then. We were almost forced into it. And I really wanted to take it away and talk to my parents about it, who know a lot more through their experience of having different jobs. And still now contracts do confuse me, and I would like a cheat sheet almost about what these actual terms mean and what is a probation period, where do I find my salary, where do I find my working hours. Just having it explained in a bit better would be easier, especially when you're young and this is your first job. You've never heard half of these terms before, and it's all stranger, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some really interesting points, and we'll pick those up. Certainly from a Youth Employment UK perspective, you know, we're already thinking about how can we explain contracts to the young people using our website more to support them in some of that information, and how we support employers with a good youth employment charter to have that conversation a bit better. So really interesting pickups there. Let's move on to things like the job description and recruitment process. I've been having some really interesting conversations lately about what employers are putting into job descriptions. I think that there is, you know, some room here for discussion about what a good job description looks like from a young person's perspective. Kim, can I come to you? You're our apprentice, and you've had apprenticeships before. What have you seen in different job descriptions? You're obviously putting up content on our website too. That's part of your apprenticeship with us. What really seems to stand out to you as good, and what can be not so good?
I think personally for me is in a job description, it needs to talk about, especially with an apprenticeship, the continuing of your professional development. I know that was something I said in my interview, that I was really keen on just continuing to grow as a person, just because I know I was only 19 at the time, and I want to continue to learn as I continue to grow within work. So I think for me, a really good thing on any job description or recruitment process is that talk of continuing training, because as a young person, we haven't got the experience, we don't have the different things for the different categories, sectors, or whatever we want to go into. So for me, it's just that continuing stuff. But I think the biggest thing that really strikes me on a job contract that I struggle with is not knowing what the requirements are for the job. They kind of give you a really brief overview. So for example, my first job was a sales advisor in a retail environment, but they didn't really give me what my jobs would be. They didn't say that it would be purely sales based. They just kind of talked about how I would just show people products basically. And they didn't talk about things like terminology or how targets would be hit, and it was just really brief.
Okay, so a bit more of that information. Anyone else got a view on what they'd like to see in job descriptions, what they don't want to see in job descriptions? I'm going to wait for someone to unmute Lawrence. There you are. And then we'll go to Lawrence and Amelia.
Yeah. So just very briefly, I think really it just needs to be made, sort of just following on from what Kim was saying there, just a bit more specific as to, you know, meeting the expectations of both the young person and the employer. Because at the minute, I still feel like it's very blurred. And in particular, when I see a lot of job applications written by employers, whether that be for whatever level, you know, apprenticeships, degrees, graduate roles, it doesn't really matter. I still see the language being used the same. And the way it's written, it can be a bit woolly and a bit vague. I would say even for an adult to understand, never mind a young person. You know, I just think they need to just spell it out in plain English, just what the responsibilities are, what their expectations are, and what they can give to you as a potential candidate. And as what Kim was saying there, you know, that opportunity for appraisals for growth, I do feel is really valued by the young person, you know, anyone who's sort of entering work for the first time. And I just feel like there needs to be a better dialogue between employers, you know, and young people. And that can be done, say, through, you know, educational settings. So, you know, schools, colleges, universities, just to help bridge that gap.
That's a really good set of points there. What is the job in plain English? What are the expectations in plain English? And how that job will help a young person develop their career in their future. I think there are three things that are really solid asks there, Lawrence. That's really, really succinct. Thanks. Amelia, let's just come to you on the job description and maybe the recruitment process. So you've had obviously experienced a couple of different types of recruitment processes too. What was good? What did you enjoy? What not so much, maybe?
So way back when I was looking for jobs, feels like ages ago now.
Just bearing in mind you'll make us all feel old. Oh, I was just going to say, bear in mind, don't talk about your way back when.
Sorry, I think I might be having some internet issues, but hopefully they'll sort themselves out soon. For me, when I was looking at jobs, it was really, some companies done it, and it was really nice to have and who actually does that role now, what their views are in a short 100-word, very small paragraph of this is what I do, this is what I've achieved, I recommend this, or I would, you know, this is just my experience of the job. It's plain and simple. It's what you expect. And it just follows on from what Lawrence said about having it in plain English. Don't fluff it up. Let's just have what we need the job, what we're looking for, what do I need as an applicant, and what will I gain from employment with the prospective company.
Amazing. And that role models, who's worked there? Is there someone like me that works at that company? What do they love about it? I think that's something we certainly advocate for at Youth Employment UK. And just on the recruitment process, who's done assessment centres? Who's done online interviews now? Who's experienced, you know, different settings and scary interviews and interviews that went really well and made you feel at home? Aaron, you unmuted off the bat there. What was your experience?
I've experienced the recruitment process at Jack Wills, where it was really like a formal assessment where you went in and you worked in groups to do an assessment. And I thought I did really well in that assessment, and I thought my interview went really well and didn't get the job. And I'd never experienced any kind of assessment before that. I like online assessments. I've done an online assessment for the 3 Phone company, and that's where you go onto like a messaging system with employees or potential employees that may work for the company, and you reply to messages in the way you would respond at work. And I think that's a really interesting and really engaging way to do an assessment, and I think it really tests people's skills because they're put on the spot to do it. and sometimes we put on the spot to do it in a short amount of time. And I've also done an assessment like that with what's the tool company called? I can't remember what it's called. Screwfix. That's it. And I've done a online interview with an events management company where I was headhunted on Indeed, and somebody found my CV. This company was new to Zoom, and they were having technical issues, and I joined the Zoom meeting and I got removed, and I contacted the company numerous times via email, and I couldn't get back on the meeting, and I never heard back from the company, and I found it very rude and unprofessional that they didn't respond to me, because it says on my CV that I'm doing a supported internship, and it's quite clear that I've got learning disabilities. And so I just found that quite difficult that they didn't respond. I got a message back on WhatsApp saying they would get back as soon as possible, but they didn't. So yeah, I think that's really, and then I've had telephone interviews online recently, which have gone really well, and I've also had a face-to-face interview as well, which went really well. So there's loads of interviews, and I've had same experience with interviews at Mountain Warehouse as well, where I got a really good interview and they thought I was a really good fit for the job, and it was only because of flexibility that I didn't get the job. The manager absolutely loved me and really thought that I was a good fit, but I just wasn't successful. And I found that really hard because it was a 6-hour contract and they wanted more flexibility. If they want more flexibility, then why don't I just increase the hours on the contract? I just think it's crazy. And then I went for another interview the second time. That manager was leaving, and it was the assistant manager that was interviewing. That manager was still there until the end of the week, but she wasn't allowed to do the interviews because she wasn't going to be there after the end of the week. So I just found that really hard because I've got the assistant manager to interview me the second time, and if I'd have had the normal manager, I'd have probably got the position.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. There are so many different challenges in that. One of the things that I really hear from you is about how the organisations communicate, and letting people know perhaps what the process is going to be in advance, so you can prepare properly, and giving kind of some real clear details on that. But also, if you're unsuccessful, I think from my view, young people need feedback so you can understand what that where you can improve for the next opportunity. And I know it can be hard when an organisation's interviewing lots of people, but it's the only way for young people to kind of learn and grow and improve it through the process. That's really interesting. Thanks, Jack. And something that we certainly are talking more and more about with organisations in terms of how to make sure that recruitment process works for everybody, and including, from a sort of diversity and inclusion perspective too. We've got a few more things here that I just had sort of thrown into the mix as points of conversation, but I am mindful of the time and sort of moving on from this session, but this kind of section. But I just wonder if any of you have got any kind of real other thoughts about training and development, things that worked really well for you. Amelia, I know there's a lot of mentoring in the employer that you work with, and I know that's something that you really advocate for. Is that just something that you think should be commonplace for organisations who are working and hiring with young people?
I agree. Being classified as young when you join a company, and you are very impressionable, but having someone who is in the role that you want to fulfill. So for me, I want to be an engineer, so I am currently being mentored by a current engineer, so that just helps. I can ask them technical questions, but I can also ask them, what is the job actually like? Can I have an honest feedback before I do consider or look elsewhere? It's just reassuring to know that there is someone with experience, almost like another parent at work, just to help with that guiding process. Because like I said, you are young, you are deemed as being impressionable. Just to have a little bit of extra advice is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a mental health perspective, I know that that can really make a difference for people in work. Ella, I wonder if there was anything that you wanted to add into this session before we just move on. You've had lots of different varied experiences over the last year. I know it's been tough for some of you.
I struggle a lot to find confidence, similar to Aaron. So there's not many sites out there that show disability confident jobs, and then in my area there's not really many anyway, and there's only one list. On that list there wasn't really many in my area, so it's like really hard to find a confident job. And I found also when a shop job, I went to apply for some shop jobs, and the application form is just not good for people with disability. Even my mum couldn't get through it, and so she hasn't got a disability, so it's really not fair. I think employers need to be able to do the application process and make sure that it's good for everyone. So let's say if I say I had Asperger's, they could change it for me. Or let's say I had ADHD, you could change it. Or if OCD, whatever just change it for that person. I think it's not really fair that you go into I'm into interview, but you go into like application process and you can't even get through it. That's what I found really hard. And then sometimes employers would say to me, "Oh, we don't want to spot you. Sorry, we want somebody we would have to spot." And it's like, well, come on, like I thought it not very nice. Especially I was like, I don't even need paid for support needs. I've got like not non-paid for support needs. Just like give me a book to write and things like that. So it's like not really very nice of employers, I think, at the moment thing to do.
Yeah, I think that disability confident issue is one that really needs tackling and addressing head on, to make sure that recruitment processes are inclusive and mean that, you some of you guys have been working with us for a little while now, and I can, happily advocate for your contributions and the brilliance that you bring to us as an organisation. And I think employers need to better understand how they can accommodate that recruitment process to make sure that young people like you can take up those great opportunities. So, and I guess that lends me, thanks Ella, I guess that lends me on to just talking about why we created the Good Youth Employment Charter. So back in 2012, we were hearing from other young people, not all of you have been around with Youth Employment UK since 2012, but, we've been hearing from young people since we started that there are so many barriers to employment, but often those barriers sit with the employer, that they're not particularly youth friendly, that they don't know how to communicate and engage young people. And so we worked with a group of young people and employers and some providers to create the 5 principles of good youth employment that you see here. So whenever an employer wants to work with Youth Employment UK and our young people, and we now have over 200,000 young people using our website a month, we won't advocate for an employer if they are not signed up to the Good Youth Employment Charter, and they have to agree to these 5 principles. So we talk about creating opportunity where we're asking employers to think about supported internships, to think about work experience, because we know young people don't always have work experience, and that's a barrier, to think about apprenticeships and other entry roles. Kickstart and traineeships are things right now that employers can be doing to create opportunity for young people. So, but they have to be good quality experiences to help young people build their aspirations, build their skills, and build their networks. Those opportunities are about sort of stepping stones for young people into, full and good quality employment. We talk to employers about fair employment, treating everybody, the way that they need to be treated based on their personal circumstances, making sure that's fair. So making sure that opportunities are safe, and making sure that young people are paid fairly for the work that they're doing, and that's reflected back in things like the benefit system and support that's available. We do know that we live in a time where some young people can't accept jobs because the pay's too low, or they can't afford the travel, or they struggle to provide lunch money or to pay for work clothes. And so we help employers to think about what they can do to bridge that gap and support young people. So fair employment covers a lot of those financial barriers that exist in young people finding opportunity. We talk a lot about recognising talent. So Jack, I know you're really passionate about people looking for work experience on a CV of a candidate. We talk to employers about, it's not about the experience, it's not about the qualifications, it's about young people's ability and talent and their passion. And that's what, people employers should be recruiting for. And that also stems across the landscape of diversity and inclusion, you know, making sure we're not excluding people based on their ethnicity, their disability, and making sure that we're giving fair chances to everybody who is talented. And I know all of you guys are and represent young people beautifully in that way. We also want organisations to develop their people, to make sure they're giving them opportunities for mentoring and support and coaching, that they get opportunities to be trained and to develop their skills and their networks, so that they can continue to progress in their careers. And most importantly, and certainly not least, we talk about youth voice. The thing that employers really need to do is listen to young people like you guys, but once you're in employment, they should continue to listen to you, you know, make sure that they're getting feedback from young people about the recruitment process, what it was like, what was good, what was bad, how can we change things, making sure that you guys and young people within their employment become the role models for the next group cohort coming into employment, and just giving you the opportunity to influence the work that's going in and on around you in terms of your career with that organisation. They're the 5 principles. When we talk to employers, we're asking them to think about these 5 things. We provide things like toolkits, and on our website we've got loads of information for employers, case studies from young people, getting into some of the detail about how they can do these 5 things really, really well. And there's a lot of data and detail that sits behind the Good Youth Employment Charter too. So that leads me on to then ask you guys, do you think there's anything missing? Is things that we've talked about today that you think could go into the Good Youth Employment Charter, or do you think, you know, from what you've seen of it, it covers those things? What else would you like to see from providers, employers, and maybe even the government going forward on this subject of quality of work? And the last question that I want you to think about as we come to each of you is what you wish. You know, we're talking to people who are potentially hiring young people right now. This recording is going out to lots of different people, recruitment people. What do you wish they did differently? What do you wish they know about young people going forward? So, Jack, any of those things that you want to just address as we sort of kind of wind up this session?
So for me, I think what they need to do is do all the things that you've said, because they always put young people to the side. They don't take them seriously. They don't take a lot of young people don't want to get experience. So I think they need to take that to the side and say, actually, this young person's great. We'll give them a chance. We'll train them up. We'll develop them, and then they'll be as good as the other people. But I think a lot of employers are afraid. They're just afraid to take young people. They just need to take that step, and then young people will be great. But they don't. They're too afraid because they just never had young people before. Their employers, people, it's just the way it is. They're just afraid, so they just need to take that step, and then they'll have a great relationship. And then when they've got one, they'll get more and more. You just need to have 1 or 2 that are good, then you get more and more, and it will just work easily.
Super, yeah. That's great. Thanks, Jack. Amelia, any thoughts from you on these big 3 questions? I know we could spend hours on this, but we just don't have the time today. But we'll do more offline with ambassadors on some of these topics. But Amelia, your thoughts?
I'll keep mine short and sweet then, because we all know I like a good chat. I personally don't think that there's anything missing in the Employment Charter from my perspective, someone who has been through the employment process. In terms of what I'd like to see from employers is let them know the policies in place, because I never knew that my company had such amazing mental health support. It was just one of the perks that I found when I walked through the door. So I think advertising to that makes it more attractive if they are looking for young people, but don't just keep it to them being young. We all grow and we all age and stuff. We're not going to be young forever. So you are going to develop and look at the development opportunities for young people. I think that's where employers really do need to look into. But going back to having what they want in a role, where can this role take you? It's not just you're not going to sit there for the rest of your life. You want to develop, how can that allow young people to progress in their career?
Amazing, absolutely brilliant answer. Lawrence, any final thoughts on you on these areas?
Yeah, just very similar along the lines to Amelia's comments there. In terms of the Good Youth Employment Charter, no sort of feedback I can really give at this stage. I think it covers it pretty succinctly. Just in terms of the second point, I would like to see, in particular for things like internships, more willingness from employers to actually allow the young person to do more. Because kind of what dampened my experience with my internships was that I just, particularly in one of my internships, I just wasn't allowed to do enough practically. And just observing is just not how I learn. I need to do hands-on experience. So really just, just because, the person might be young, I would just urge employers, look, just don't be afraid to give them responsibility. Don't just say to them, well, you're just an intern, or you're too young, or yeah, I'm only going to learn if you actually allow me to do things. So, that's something I would really urge employers, just on the second point in particular. And just lastly, in terms of the third point, I just think to tackle this, there just needs to be sort of, as I was saying before, just more communication between educational settings and employers, because I just don't feel it exists enough. I mean, it's great that, the apprenticeships are being made more aware of, but I do still feel like there's still work to be done in that space. And, I do think it would help employers actually, get to understand us as young people better, and us as young people getting to know employers better. It's just finding that middle ground, but I just don't feel like we're nowhere near there yet, and there's still more work to do there.
Brilliant. I think that's really useful. I think that communication point is excellently made, Lawrence. Thank you. Aaron, Ella, Kim, Alicia, anybody that just wants to have a kind of final view on these points, anything that you think the Good Youth Employment Charter could continue to cover and look at, or something that you wish an employer knew right now about young people? Alicia.
I don't think there's anything to add to the Good Youth Employment Charter, and I'm not sure I've got anything to provide in terms of what employers should be providing and thinking about. But I just want to kind of really quickly say that it's a two-way relationship. So even though when a young person applies for a role, and if they get it, they're gaining employment, they're also a shiny star. They're bringing in new ideas. They're a new youth voice. Like, they know things that maybe the older generation will not know. They'll be able to bring something new to the table. So just remember that, although it's like you're gaining something, you're also giving. So it's a two-way relationship.
I think that's an excellent point. And Kim, we're going to give you the last word.
So I agree with the others, and I think there's not really anything to add to the charter, but I think for what I'd like to see from employers and providers is, if they're asking for experience, I think they should give an option of training. So if you don't have the experience but have the willing side to be able to say, but I will do training, by that point you're developing a young person who's going to know everything about your employer, and actually in long term you're going to end up with a better person who will end up probably being a lot more loyal to the organisation and probably end up staying throughout the whole thing, and as Alicia said, then continue to develop and learn as an organisation.
Amazing. Well, I hope you're planning on staying with us, that's for sure. Guys, this has been really interesting, really insightful, as it always is when we have these debates. I hope that for the organisations and individuals watching it have been inspired by something that they've heard today and can take some action. From a Youth Employment UK point of view, the action is to, ask organisations who are planning on or are working with young people to sign up to the Good Youth Employment Charter. It is a way then that we can recognise good practice to young people. You get the Youth Friendly Employer badge, and it's something that we encourage young people in our networks to look out for, so they know they can trust that organisation is going to do the right thing by them. And that's entirely free to join. So really, it is just a simple case of visiting our website, which is www.youthemployment.org.uk, and filling in the Good Youth Employment Charter form. Thank you so much again, everyone. I know we'll have another drop-in next week, and we'll continue this conversation as we always do. Your wisdom has been very well received. And thanks to everyone that has tuned into today's session. Take care now. Bye-bye, everyone.